Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of Walk of Faith. I'm excited to be sitting down with Matt Whitaker to discuss his latest film, Truth and Treason. I got to tell you, Matt, immediately I'm reading about you, right? And I'm always trying to find similarities, and I'm reading how you were an actor, right? Then you sort of, for me, very similar, an actor. Then I became sort of a filmmaker, producer. Then I had this experience, but I wanted to be famous. I wanted to be a movie star. And as I'm reading one of your interviews, I'm like, very similar story. I had this awakening on a pilgrimage in Fatima, and then I sort of reevaluated my life, and now we're here discussing your film. But thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be with you. It's really cool.
So as I'm watching the film, I'm always trying. I mean, it's funny because as you're watching these films, you don't enjoy them the same way somebody would enjoy it in the theater. I'm always looking for things, writing and stopping it. But there was two things that kept coming to mind. One was what is truth, and I want you to explain the film, of course. But what is truth? That word it goes throughout the film. But then I got this sort of this tickle inside because I'm writing an article about who is your neighbor, and that
Mm.
kept coming up throughout the film. So I want people, in case they're not familiar with Helmuth Hubener's story, if you could explain Truth and Treason, explain the story, and what drew you to the story, because it's been a while since when you first started to work on this, or you were exposed to his story.
Yeah. So in short, it's a true story about a 16-year-old kid in Nazi Germany named Helmut Hubener who been born and raised, surrounded by propaganda his whole life. And then when he was 16, his older brother, who was a soldier in the German army, came home from France, and he smuggled home with him a shortwave radio, which was highly illegal in Nazi Germany. But Helmut was a curious, really bright kid, and one night he tuned in and discovered the BBC from London, which was broadcasting in the German language, and he started to hear the truth for the first time in his life. His whole life, again, just have only being able to have access to what they called the People's Radio, which was especially created by the Nazis to only receive on a very narrow band only what was approved by Goebbels and Hitler, only the newspapers that they approved. And suddenly he's hearing truth. He's hearing real information, and he immediately recognizes it and sees that, kind of realizes, has this eye-opening experience that, oh, these are the bad guys. Now, he was also seeing things around him. He had a good friend at his church who had a Jewish friend who had converted to Christianity and saw what happened to him, and that eventually he was taken and arrested and put into a concentration camp. And so these things were all kind of happening at the same time for him. He also was employed he worked for the Nazis. He worked in the city hall in Hamburg there, where he had access to banned literature. They had an archive of banned books that nobody else could read. Once his eyes started opening and he was getting the truth from the BBC, he also started sneaking in, pulling out some of these banned books and reading them. And then when his Jewish friend, when his name was Salomon Schwartz, when Salomon was taken, that was kind of the final straw. And Helmut picked up the only weapon he knew how to use, and that was a typewriter.
Mm.
And that was his weapon. That was his form of resistance. And he started typing out the truth that he was getting from the BBC, that he was getting from these banned books, but also just that he was putting together in his mind. Just a really brilliant kid, and typing these leaflets on little red pieces of paper, kind of like I've got on my shirt there. I'm merchant right now. And then running out at night, putting them on the streets of Hamburg at night, extremely dangerous. And then he recruited his two best friends, Carl Schnibe and Rudy Voba. And these three teenage boys, 15, 16, and 17 years old, are going out on the streets of Hamburg at night, putting out these leaflets. The Gestapo are finding them. Some of them are getting turned in. And there's a Gestapo agent who we know historically, his name was Erwin Musner, becomes obsessed with finding who is putting out these treasonous leaflets because they're so well written, they're so insightful, so filled with the truth, and the Gestapo knew the truth, that they're just, intent on finding who it was. They thought for sure it was a university professor or something like that was writing these. So this is the story that unfolds, and as it builds and builds, and Helmut expands his network and his efforts, and suddenly a little red piece of paper isn't enough, and he's writing on these big full sheets of white paper, no margins, top to bottom, just can't get it out fast enough. Um, and at the same time, this Gestapo agent is closing in on him. And an incredible story, a story that I found in 2001 when I met Carl Schniba. He was the last surviving member of this group, and I just called him up on the phone, found him in the phone book, called him up, and asked if he would share his story. And good Carl, he said, "Yeah, sure, come on over." This old German man. And I went over to his house, and he told me the short version that day of his story. And I walked out of his house just absolutely convinced that I had to, share this story. I was a documentary filmmaker at the time. And so we did. We interviewed Carl. I found everybody that I could find that was still alive, that knew the boys, that knew Helmut. And we did a documentary for PBS in 2002, and the story would still not let go of me.
Mm.
So I started writing a script, and actually started that, this process of, I want to make this into a film that can get out to the world. And
Wow.
it's been a journey, but that's when it started. That's how I found the story, changed my life, and I've just been
Ah,
compelled to do that.
Matt, I swear I wanted to interrupt you like 5 times because you said so many things. I'm gonna.
Sorry.
Oh no, I was no, it was good because I'm like sitting here going, "Oh my God, there was so many things you said." But I just want to just say one thing. What you
Yeah.
just said, right? There's a film I'm working on. Did a documentary on a man called Father Capodanno. He was a chaplain killed in Vietnam. I did a
Ooh.
documentary. It was up for an Emmy probably about 12, 15 years ago. I did a lot of stories on him, but this one I just produced, right? But I did so many stories. Never left my side, that story. Now we're trying to get the feature film made. I was actually with his nephew today, and his nephew is about 80 something years old. It's been 10 years, I would say, I've been working on his story. And every day I wake up, I have to tell this guy's story. I cannot go to sleep. I pray, I'm like, God, please just release me from it. I cannot stop. It's like when you find a story like that you know can change the world, change people's lives, like Helmut did, like your story. I can't stop. It's unbelievable. But you said so many things. I mean, when I looked at the film, right, and you think about like I can't get past the truth. Like there's all these versions of the truth, right? And when you see, especially in church, right, biblical principles, like that is the truth. But yet in the film, and this happens all over. It's not just just in that film, but we reinterpret the truth, right? Or we sort of make it fit culture, society, or standards, or even our own justifications, our own world that we're
Yeah.
in. Like we
True.
create our own truth, but we know the biblical principles, right? Who is my neighbor? Everyone knows the Good Samaritan story. So how are
Yeah.
they able to manipulate biblical truth to make it fit into the Gestapo or to the Nazis' beliefs? I understand what would happen if they didn't agree with them, but how are the people able to sit there and sort of acknowledge and believe that this is the new truth because they know that it's not? I mean, we know it's not. How are they able
Well,
to manipulate it that way?
yeah, it's a great question, and I've thought a lot about that. And I think one of the things that I've learned in this journey, and doing years of decades of research into this time period in Nazi Germany, is that I think it's easy to look back at that time period, 80 plus years ago, and really kind of see it in black and white. To see the evil Nazis, the evil Gestapo, and the heroic resistance fighters, and both of those things are true. But there was this big gray area in the middle where most Germans lived out their lives, and being surrounded and inundated with propaganda and only the information that the Nazis wanted people to know. It was genuinely really hard to get at real true information, even just true news and those kinds of things. And so I think that people start making decisions based on the information that they have. Yes, there were so many faithful, good Christians turning to the Bible, and obviously so many good Jews, turning to the Torah and turning to their scriptures, to the Old Testament, and seeking for that there. But there was a lot of pressure to conform. There was a lot of pressure and danger if you didn't conform. And so I know you saw in the film, in this little congregation that Helmut belongs to, his bishop, his ecclesiastical leader, and I've met his three sons. I met people who knew him, and they all, without exception, said he was such a good, kind man who also had totally bought in to the Nazi Party. And so, he was taking certain doctrines from, from his faith and taking certain biblical interpretations and trying to make them fit with what the party was saying. I think it's a very, again, in retrospect, it's really disturbing. I think in the moment, I think it's human. I think it's understandable, not justifiable, but understandable. And that's what that was, really Helmut's dilemma was I go to church where I've learned, to love my neighbor, to be the good Samaritan. And yet there's a sign that's out on the door that says Jews are not allowed to enter. How do I reconcile that? And so that was really his dilemma. Thankfully, there was, the bishop felt that way, but there were other members of his congregation around him who didn't feel that way, and who he could go to for, for advice, and those kinds of things. But it's also a teenager. How does a teenager, when I was 16, I tell you, I was not thinking about the truth. I mean, I was thinking about that girl, and I was thinking about acne and stuff like that. This kid, as a 16-year-old, was thinking about really, really important things. And that's one of the things I think that makes him so, so incredible.
Yes, I agree. Even to the end, which I don't want to share, but most people know. I mean,
Yeah.
he would not, his convictions would not allow him to give in. And I always reflect on that too. And then I'm going to ask you, I mean, because I don't know what I would do in that situation, right? Because I know what I should do, and it's easy, like you said, to look back to say, but then sometimes I don't know. I think I would be afraid. I don't know if I would be willing. I say I'm going to carry my cross and lay down my life, but would I do that when he was in that situation, especially when it's not just you, it's your family, it's your friends, it's the people you love. I always ask myself that question. What would I do in that situation? Because it's easy to look back, but and I wonder, I mean, you must have reflected on that. And when you said about how the pen was his weapon, right? In a sense, your typewriter, right, is your
Yeah.
weapon.
Yeah.
And he showed at the end of the film, which was so inspiring. And I think the whole film is something we can all reflect on. Like that question, I can't get it past I can't stop thinking about it. And I just did a video about it. Who is my neighbor? Because as a follower of Christ, same thing. I'm telling everyone you're my brother and sister in Christ, and you're my neighbor. But then we have such division within our own congregations, within our own religion, within
Mhm.
theological differences. Like, so that's something we could all think about and really relate to. And this is a film that took place, during World War II. But at the end, too, to think about, like, that he was willing I don't want to actually give away the end too much, but I was just curious, like, did you reflect on that point at all? Like, what would you do in that situation?
Constantly over the last 20 plus years. I've been asking myself, what would I have done? And if I'm completely honest, because I have a wife and children, I probably wouldn't have done what he did. Because, there was a term actually used by the Nazis called Sippenhaft. It's a German word which basically means if we arrest you, we're going to arrest your whole family. Everybody's getting interrogated. People are going to get tortured. So if I'm a husband, and a father, and I discover something and I feel like I need to say something or I need to do something about this, but if I do and I get caught, it's not just me, it's the people I love who are also going to suffer. That was a real, very real, situation that everybody was dealing with. So I've asked myself, what would I do? I think maybe a more helpful question for me has been, what will I do now? Because
Oh, that's great.
I'm not living in Nazi Germany, thankfully. And so for me, I have opportunities to stand up, but they're maybe less dire. My life isn't on the line, but if I see someone who's being mistreated, do I just look at it and say, oh, they shouldn't be doing that? Or do I go over and say, hey, let's just a brief experience I had recently where I was standing at a bus stop, and across this busy street, four or five lanes, busy street, cars going both ways in a parking lot. I saw a guy and his, I guess his girlfriend, and he started screaming at her and pointing at her, and then it looked like he was about to get physical. And there was something and for a minute, there were several of us, and I was just watching it happen. And then all of a sudden, I heard myself say, "Hey!" And I yelled and kind of like started across the street, and somebody else was kind of doing the same thing. And we saw this guy turn and look at me, and then just walk away from her, kind of leaving the girl there. That for me was an important moment. because if he wouldn't have stopped, now I know I would have gone. I'm not a good fighter. I don't know what would have happened, but I would have gone and tried to do something. I don't know if I would have done that if it weren't for Helmut's example.
That is
There was something in me that said, say something.
Oh, but that's the power of film. That's the power of the pen, the power of what you're creating is to walk away, reflect. I mean, I watched this film, it was several days ago, and I can't stop thinking about those things. I
Mhm.
mean, I've interviewed so many people that have been put in situations like that, and I always question that. I mean, there was so many stories whenever I'm interviewing somebody, so many stories just filter my mind. I have a good friend, Jason Jones, you might know him. And this
Mhm.
guy goes on the front line and he's willing to lay down his life. And I've asked him that question so many times, and he's willing to give up his life. And there's a part of me that I question. I'm like, would I be willing to do that? And I haven't been in a situation like that, so I don't know how I would respond. But like you said, after working on this project and really reflecting on that, you see that you're willing to put yourself out there. And I think what happens, especially for me, is, and like you, like we have to obey that voice inside of us, right? God's communicating to us in a way. And then there's I don't believe in coincidences. So you were there for a reason to stop whatever might have happened. And we have to obey. Because if I don't obey, just like in your film, my convictions will wake me up at night. And I'll say, you
Okay.
have to do something. Otherwise, I'm just like anyone, just proclaiming the gospel from my warm little house in New Jersey. But I'm not willing to carry my cross. I'm going to put it down because it's heavy. But this film has given me, and I think everyone that watches that, there's so many important points. And just to think he was 16 years old.
Incredible.
16. So, I mean,
Wow.
how has this film changed your life? I know you just named one thing, but you've been working on this for half of your life. I mean, how has this changed
Yeah.
your life?
Well, and I appreciate that this is, I think, the kind of show that you're doing. I think I can share, that I just had a plan to write the script once I knew I needed to make, but I didn't have a plan to direct it. Initially, I just wanted to write the script, and my writing partner and I were writing it. We had optioned the script out to a big producer in LA. He had a director attached. We were just taking notes, and that was going to be it. And then on a very specific day in a very specific place in 2005, um, God spoke to me in the way that he does me, just a really, really intense, very clear direction and feeling in my heart and mind, and said, Matt, you need to direct this
Mm.
film. And it was so overpowering. I feel like I can receive that kind of, or at least direction from God fairly regularly, but not like that. This was one of those for me, like once every 10 or 20 years, I'll get something like that. To marry the woman that I married, I got something like that,
Yes.
this was one of those, and I went home to my wife that night and I told her what had happened, and I said, I think that I'm supposed to direct this film, and she was totally supportive. And I said, now, hun, this may take a couple years, and that was in 2005.
No.
And thinking that it would be 2 years would be a long journey, but we could get it done,
Oh.
and she has been the rock through
Mm.
this entire thing. My wife is an incredible a woman of God. She is, just an incredibly faithful woman, and she has been the rock underneath this. So that's what really has kept me going. And that experience, although there have been plenty of times of if you're anything like I am,
Yep.
where I forget, and I question as why is this
Oh,
happening,
yeah.
or why isn't this happening when I want it to happening? Why can't I get that cast member when I think that's who I want? Uh, and God has the plan, He has the
Oh,
timing,
God.
and when I can learn to trust that, things work out way better. And they have. It just wasn't in the timing that I thought I wanted.
Were you in my room about an hour ago? That I was having the same conversation. So my company is called God's Plan Productions, and that is exactly what I struggle with. And same thing with my wife. Like she's like I always call her my angel. She's on my phone. She's my angel because she's like I'll be negative sometimes, and sometimes you have the pity party. Like, oh, it's not going to work out, is it? And then she'll just say something positive. But what happens to me too, and it might happen to you, when I have that clear sort of that voice of God, where I know it's God, it's usually like this was the film. Like I'm telling you, I was going to give this film up, this Father Capodanno film, and my father passed away about 2.5 years ago. I'm
Mm.
reading the script. He was in Vietnam, and I'm trying to find reasons not to do this movie. And all of a sudden, I'm reading the script, and it's all about Vietnam, and and I'm like, oh my God. And his father just died, and I'm like, oh God, I can't stop. And it was God just giving me the strength to just do another day, another day. And now I look at it and said, I've come so far. I'm going to quit now. I'm not going to quit. But what happens? I know with me, it's that voice of the enemy that comes and says, maybe you've misunderstood what God said, or maybe it's supposed to. And it's amazing, right? And then he uses all these different ways, these voices, and these sort of, you get these affirmations from other people, and then I'm like, no, I know what I heard, like you. And then when you look back and you see the success of this film and all the projects you worked on and how it's going to impact so many people, you're like, you know what I mean? Like you just know. And that, you know what gives me the strength too is I always recite what I'm going to say on stage when I'm, and that's so every time I sort of overcome adversity, I'm like, I add it to my speech. And I see
Mm.
myself on stage glorifying God and giving the speech and inspiring other people. Every time I hit a roadblock, and it keeps me going another day, another day. But
I love
Matt,
that.
man, I mean, this is just talking to you. I mean, obviously I think we've experienced some of the same things,
Yes,
and
we have.
just to see like the amount of work you put into that, because it's inspiring to let people know like not everybody makes a film and or writes a script and it's released the next day. I mean, this is 20 years of work.
Yeah, yeah. And it's been, I'll tell you what, now that it's done, um, it's so rewarding to, we've had some, it opens tomorrow, but we've had screenings, special screenings with, had a premiere and stuff. And to see how people are reacting to it, to see the deep cathartic emotions, and people walking out filled with peace and hope, and deep emotion has just been so rewarding because despite the 20 plus year journey, it's still a real possibility that we could have finished it and then it was kind of like, it's all right. That still could have happened. And I'm just so grateful that throughout all of this process, again, God had the timing in mind. He knew the cast that needed to be in it. I'll just say, when we were shooting, if you've had a chance, sorry, I'll turn off my phone here. We were shooting, and if you had a chance to see the our lead actor, Ewan Horrocks, who plays 16-year-old Helmut Hubener, incredible actor. Just he was a gift. That kid carrying, this is his first lead role. He's just carrying this project. And we were talking one day with him on set, and explaining that, I started this script back in 2002, and he said, "Yeah, it's the year I was born." He said, "You just had to wait till I got old enough to play this." And I said, "Absolutely, totally worth it."
Wow. And it's true. I mean, it's true. Listen, it's so hard to, I mean, I'm always negotiating with God. Come on, God, we had this guy. I'm always trying to find ways. But,
Yeah.
I was reading something the other day about persistent prayer. And I always think about when I'm constantly asking God for something, it actually shows that I doubt my faith or I have doubt in God. But actually, as I'm reading and writing about it, it's more about it's just trusting in God. It's showing that, I have a loving father that I love and I trust God. It's not that I'm reminding him, but it's just showing him that I know it's going to happen. I trust in you. I don't have this plan B, but I'm always trying to nudge him a little bit. And if he's listening, God, I got to get this movie made. I mean, I gave myself 2 years. I'm like, it's been
Yeah.
about 10, and probably
Yeah.
more. So
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I
No,
just
that's
want to get it done. I want to get it done before the guy Al, his nephew, who was his nephew who told us the story, passes away. I mean, he's healthy, but that's one of my
never
fears.
know.
Yeah, is that I'm not able to finish the film, and he's not able to sit there and witness it. But it's all up to God, right?
Yeah, no, that's right. And I had a similar thing because of our friendship with Karl Heinz Schnibe, the last surviving member of the group. And he wanted, and we all wanted so badly to get this film done before he passed. And unfortunately, that didn't happen, and I was felt so bad about that. But I can feel him, even when we were in production. I'll tell you what, the kid that we cast who plays Carl, a young Scottish actor named Ferdinand Mackay, he is the re-embodiment of Karl Heinz Schnibe. In fact, Karl's widow, who I'm still close with, she just went to the premiere, and Ferdinand Mackay, the actor, was there, and she just said, "That's Karl. That is Karl." So I don't believe in reincarnation, but I'll tell you what we found. I think Karl guided us to a kid who's like, "Yeah, that's me.
I agree.
Cast that kid."
Oh my God. So now the film's out tomorrow. You said in all theaters. Can you give us a little information like how do people find out about your projects, the film, where is it going to be, what theaters? Can you give us a little more information?
You bet. Yeah. So it's going to be out on 2,100 screens tomorrow, which is just, I have to say that out loud and I can't even believe it. It's so incredible. It's Angel Studios is our distributor. And so people can go to angel.com/truth. And if they go there, enter in like their zip code or their city that they live in, and it'll find the nearest theaters that are closest to them. And they can even pre-order tickets there. I think today, like no fee. They can just pre-order tickets, get their seats. So angel.com/truth. And it's really fun to see the excitement. And the theater, the cool thing is that the theaters see that. If they see people that are going and then pre-ordering tickets and stuff, that gives them the signal, oh, we're going to add another screen, or we're going to keep this in for another weekend, that kind of a thing. So I just love it when people are out there finding it, pre-ordering, and especially, yeah, just coming out and enjoying it. There's nothing, this, there's nothing like
Nothing like it.
that experience in a dark room with a bunch of strangers, all feeling the same emotions, laughing together and crying together, witnessing this story. That for me is one of the reasons that I do what I do.
There's no distractions. And one thing too, we as Christians, we talk about how we need more faith-based films, but yet we don't support them in the theaters. We need to go to the theaters and watch these films. And like you said, it's such a different experience. It's no distractions. I don't have my dog barking and my son screaming. I mean,
Yeah.
I advise people, and we love Angels projects and films. I mean, we support all of Angels productions, and I advise people to support this film. Matt, it's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. But what a joy to speak with you as well.
Thank you. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Walk in Faith. Always remember you have the ability to inspire and evangelize your words and actions. God bless you.